When I opened the faded envelope, I thought it was just another one of my father's hospital bills. But what I found inside made my chest tighten until I could barely breathe. A marriage certificate. And not the one that tied him to my mother. It was dated 12 years into their marriage, and it bore his name, my father's, alongside that of a woman I had never heard of. Her name was Layla Noor. That moment is carved into my memory like a wound that refuses to close. The sunlight from the window hit the paper just enough for the gold seal to glimmer, mocking me, almost, while the rest of the world went still. For a few long seconds, I couldn't hear anything but the clock ticking on the wall, each sound heavier than the last. My mother had been gone for barely 6 months. We were still picking up the pieces, still learning to breathe in a house that felt too quiet. And now this. I sank into her old armchair, the one she used to sit in while knitting, with her soft beige shawl still draped over the backrest, and whispered out loud, "Who are you, Layla Noor?" Before all this, life had a rhythm. My father, Arif, was the kind of man who spoke little and expected even less. He had worked as a government accountant for most of his life, the sort of man whose shirts were always perfectly ironed, whose shoes always polished. Growing up, I thought he was the picture of honesty and routine. My mother, Nadia, balanced him out. She was warmth, soft laughter, fragrant meals, and open arms. She made ordinary things feel special. The smell of cardamom in her tea, the way she hummed while folding laundry, the little notes she'd leave on my school lunch. To me, they were the example of quiet love. Not the dramatic kind, just simple, enduring companionship. Even after my mother got sick, my father never left her side. He'd wake up before dawn to make her soup, change her medicine trays with a precision that made nurses blush, and sit by her hospital bed reading the newspaper aloud, so she wouldn't feel alone. So, when she passed, I thought his grief would swallow him whole. Instead, he turned to silence. He moved through the house like a ghost, packing her things methodically into boxes, saying he couldn't bear to see her clothes anymore. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. "Your mother hated clutter," he'd said once, his tone flat. "She'd want me to keep things tidy." Maybe I should have noticed it then, that slight detachment, that mechanical grief. But I told myself everyone mourns differently. It wasn't until I started going through her things myself, sorting old files and documents to finalize her estate, that I found that envelope. It was tucked inside a file labeled simply "House Papers," between electricity bills and land documents. The marriage certificate was crisp, official, and terrifyingly real. Arif Ahmed, my father's full name, and beneath it, Layla Noor, legally married, dated April 2004. The date hit me like a slap. My parents celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary that year. I remember because I'd made them a card in school, drawn 2 stick figures holding hands under a heart. How could he have been married to another woman then? I reread it again and again, half hoping I'd misread the names. But no, there it was in black and white, witnessed and signed. I called my cousin Maya that night, my voice shaking. "Maya, listen. I think Baba, he might have another wife." "What? That's impossible. Uncle Arif? No way." I found a marriage certificate. Her name is Layla. It's legal, Maya. Maybe it's a mistake. You know how government paperwork can be. But it wasn't a mistake. Deep down, I knew. My father didn't make mistakes. Not with numbers, not with papers, not with anything. For the next few days, I couldn't look him in the eye. I'd pour him tea, ask about his medicines, and then quietly retreat to my room, watching him from behind half-closed doors, searching for some hint of guilt. He seemed perfectly normal, maybe too normal. Then one evening, I heard him on the phone. His voice was low, softer than usual, tender in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Yes, I'll come soon. I promise. I just need to finish things here first." Something in the tone, the gentleness, the familiarity, made my heart twist. I stood frozen in the hallway, holding my breath until I heard him say her name. "Layla, please not now." That was all the confirmation I needed. My father, my moral, disciplined, almost rigid father, was still in touch with his secret wife. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like my childhood had been rewritten in front of me. Every memory, every bedtime story, every family dinner now had a shadow behind it. And for the first time in my life, I hated him. But hate, as I would soon learn, was just the beginning. Because when I confronted him, I wasn't just about to uncover a secret marriage. I was about to discover an entire other family. The next morning, I decided I couldn't live in half-truths anymore. So I walked into the kitchen, where my father sat reading the newspaper, as if the world was still the same. He looked up, calm as ever. "You're up early," he said. "Baba," I started, my voice trembling. "Who is Layla Noor?" The air changed. He froze just for a second, but that second said everything. He carefully folded the newspaper, set it down, and leaned back in his chair. "Where did you hear that name?" "From a piece of paper," I said, pulling the marriage certificate from my pocket. "You married her while you were still married to Amy." He stared at the document as if it were a ghost come back to haunt him. No denial, no confusion, just silence. "Sit down, Amina," he said finally. His tone wasn't angry. It was tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. I didn't sit. "How could you?" I asked. "She loved you, Baba. She trusted you. You took care of her when she was sick. Was that guilt? Were you trying to make up for this?" He rubbed his temples. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I shouted. "Because it looks like betrayal to me." He sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that comes from decades of regret. Then he said words I never thought I'd hear. "Layla was your mother's cousin." My mind raced. "What?" "When your mother and I married," he continued, "Layla was already living with us for a while. She had nowhere to go. Her husband had abandoned her. She helped your mother during pregnancy, took care of you when you were a baby. Your mother insisted she stay. But as years passed, things got complicated." He looked away. Layla was diagnosed with a heart condition. The doctors wouldn't treat her unless she had a family guardian. Your mother was terrified she'd be sent away, left to die. So she asked me to marry her on paper so she could get treatment. I blinked, stunned. "You're saying Amy knew?" "She arranged it." The words didn't make sense. I wanted to believe him, I needed to, but the timeline, the secrecy, the tone, something still didn't add up. Then why hide it from me? Why keep it after Amy passed? He hesitated. Because it didn't end there. Those 5 words made my stomach drop. "After your mother died," he continued softly, I went to check on Layla. She'd moved to another city.
She was alone.
And I couldn't turn away. I started sending her money. Then sometimes I stayed there a few days when I visited for work. My voice cracked. So, she wasn't just your responsibility. She became your wife. He didn't deny it. A strange silence filled the room, thick, suffocating, irreversible. I remember feeling my knees weaken, so I finally sat down, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stand anymore. Do I have siblings? I asked, half afraid of the answer. He closed his eyes. A daughter. Her name is Zara. She's 18.
18.
I was 26. That meant she was born while I was still in school. Does she know about us? I whispered. He nodded slowly. She knows everything. I wanted to scream.
To break something.
To make him feel the chaos he had unleashed inside me. But all I could do was whisper. You lied to us for your entire life. No, he said quietly. I protected both of you. By lying? He didn't answer. He just sat there, his hands trembling, eyes full of something between guilt and surrender. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every corner of the house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories that no longer belonged to me. I kept hearing my mother's laughter, her soft voice saying, "Trust your father, Amina. He'll always do what's right." The irony burned. The next day, I took the train to the address on one of the bank receipts I'd found among my father's papers, a small town 2 hours away. That's where I met her, Layla Noor. She opened the door herself, a frail woman with kind eyes and streaks of silver in her hair. For a moment, I thought I was looking at an older version of my mother. "You must be Amina," she said softly, as if she had been expecting me. I stood frozen. "You know who I am?" "Of course," she smiled sadly. "Your father talks about you all the time." The way she said it, calm, sincere, made it impossible to hate her. Inside, the house was modest, clean, quiet. A single framed photo on the table caught my eye, my father and a young girl, smiling. "Zara," she said, noticing my gaze. "She's at college. She's always wanted to meet you." I didn't know what to say. I'd come here ready for confrontation, for anger, but all I felt was an ache I couldn't name. "Did my mother know?" I asked finally. Layla took a deep breath.
"Yes.
In the beginning she did.
She wanted to help me.
But later, I think she regretted it. Things went too far. By the time she wanted to end it, it was too late. We were all trapped by what we thought was kindness. Her words shattered me more than any confession could, because now it wasn't just betrayal. It was tragedy, 3 lives tangled by good intentions, love, and silence. Before leaving, Layla held my hand. "Your father loves you, Amina. Whatever else you think of him, never doubt that." I nodded, though my heart was a storm. When I returned home that night, my father was sitting in the dark. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just said, "You met her." I didn't reply. I sat across from him, and for the first time, I saw him not as my father, but as a flawed man who'd made choices he didn't know how to escape. "What now?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, eyes tired but peaceful. "You live your life," he said, "and maybe one day you'll forgive me." I didn't answer, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel hate, just sorrow. And maybe that was the beginning of understanding. The days that followed were strange. Not angry, not peaceful, just quiet. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide whether it would still be a home or just a memory. I moved through each room like someone learning to walk again. Every object had changed meaning. The family photos, the books on the shelf, the embroidered cushions my mother made, they all seemed to ask the same question. Will you forgive him? And I didn't have an answer. Sometimes, I caught my father staring out the window, lost in thoughts I could never reach. He looked smaller now, not physically but spiritually, like a man who had spent his entire life trying to hold together two worlds, and now both had finally slipped through his fingers. One evening I made tea, 2 cups the way my mother used to. I placed one in front of him and sat down. We didn't speak for a long time. Only the sound of the clock and the faint hiss of the kettle filled the air. Finally, I said, "Tell me about her, about Layla." He looked up, surprised, then nodded slowly. "She was gentle," he said. "Quieter than your mother, but strong in her own way. She used to read poetry at night, Foy's mostly. When she smiled, it was soft, like she didn't want to disturb the air." He paused. "I didn't mean to love her, Amina. But sometimes love isn't something we plan. It's something that happens when we're too weak to stop it." I wanted to be angry again, to say, "You should have been stronger." But instead I asked, "And Amy? Did you still love her?" He looked at me, eyes filled with tears that finally fell. "Always," he whispered, "even when I failed her. Especially then." Something in that broke me, because in that moment, I saw not the man who betrayed us, but a man who had spent his life drowning quietly in the consequences of his own humanity. I reached across the table and touched his hand. He didn't expect it. His fingers trembled slightly, and for the first time since I'd found that envelope, he smiled. Just a small, tired smile, but it was enough. A few weeks later, I met Zara. It happened almost by accident. I was visiting the city where Layla lived when I saw her, sitting in a small cafe, headphones in, sketching something in a notebook. I recognized her instantly. Maybe it was her eyes, the same as my father's. I hesitated, then walked up to her. "Zara?" She looked up, cautious. "Yes, I'm Amina." Her pen froze midair. For a moment, she just stared at me, then her expression softened. "You came." I nodded, sitting across from her. The silence between us was heavy, but not hostile, just fragile, like something that could shatter or heal. "I've wanted to meet you for so long," she said. "I used to look at pictures of you Baba kept in his wallet. That caught me off guard." He carried my picture?" She smiled faintly. "Always." We talked for hours, about school, about art, about how strange it felt to be connected by blood but separated by secrets. At one point, she said quietly, "You hate him, don't you?" I took a long breath. I did, for a while. But now, I think I just pity him. "He was trying to make everyone happy," she said. "He just didn't realize that in doing so, he broke all of us." I looked at her and realized she wasn't my rival. She was just another victim of the same silence. Before we parted, she hugged me. It wasn't dramatic, just gentle, hesitant. But in that small gesture, something inside me shifted. Because forgiveness doesn't arrive like lightning. It comes slowly, like dawn creeping into a dark room. When I returned home that evening, my father was asleep in his armchair, the newspaper still open in his lap. His breathing was shallow, but peaceful.
I watched him for a long time.
The man who raised me lied to me, loved me, all at once. For the first time, I whispered not in anger, but in understanding. I forgive you, Baba.
He didn't hear me.
Maybe he didn't need to. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you give to someone. It's something you give for yourself. Months passed. Seasons changed. Layla's health worsened, and when she passed away, I went with my father to her funeral. Zara stood beside me, holding my hand. And in that quiet cemetery, as we lowered the flowers into the earth, I finally saw my father cry without restraint, not the dignified tears of duty, but the raw sobs of a man who had carried too much for too long. That night, he said only one thing to me before bed. Thank you for being here. And I said, you don't have to carry it anymore, Baba. He smiled faintly. Maybe now none of us do. Sometimes love isn't pure. It's messy. It's flawed. It breaks rules, hearts, and sometimes families. But maybe that's what makes it real. Because we don't live perfect stories. We live complicated ones. And in the end, maybe all we can do is forgive, not because they deserve it, but because we deserve peace.